Hello and welcome back to the Stronghold. I'm the Magi, and some of you may have noticed that I never did a looking back segment for Lost Caverns of Ixalan. And well, that was because Foundations was pending at that time. We were just starting to get previews, and I really wanted to see what impact Foundations was going to have before giving those recommendations on Lost Caverns. So today we are going to be doing Lost Caverns and Murders of Karlov Manor, as we are in the process of receiving the final Murders packs for free that we will as free-to-play players on Arena. But before we get into all that, take just a moment to like, comment, and subscribe, because that kind of thing really keeps this boat moving. Now, what were we talking about? Oh yeah, right. Alright, so first off, this sort of late season analysis is primarily for those newer players that were not around during the primary set season and thus weren't following the plan and gathering resources as usual, so you have little to no cards from the set or sets in question. When I'm doing that sort of late analysis, there's three primary things I like to think about. One is red decks, because they are just so universally good and approachable for new players across multiple formats. Singleton or brawl decks, be that your 100 card, don't call it historic brawl, or the standard brawl 60 card deck varieties. Both commanders and cards that are specifically good in that format, although primarily looking at budget-worthy commanders. And beyond that, then we have those singleton banger cards, those that punch way above their wildcard value, cards that you will use over and over again for years to come. And last but certainly not least, as we move into a standard environment with 6 standard releases per year, the bar is set way higher on these. They really need to be top tier flexible cards in order to really earn a spot here for conversation. Now, let's start things off with red, and in this particular two-set analysis, there's really only one card to consider, and of course, that is Geological Appraiser. And I know what you're thinking, a 4-mana 3/2 really isn't that impressive, and you would be right, except for the inherent card advantage of the built-in Discover 3 trigger. That is quite a lot. In fact, this card was banned in March of 2024 across more than one format, if I remember correctly. And that makes it pretty darn noteworthy. It also means that for some of you, if you're around during that time, you should have multiple copies of this just by using the ban wildcard trick. Also, this 2 copies were included in the 2025 starter decks that summer. So many of you may already have a few copies of this. Others of you might want to consider investing in this. And don't forget that ultimately it was revised and restructured for the Alchemy format. And that card will be used in the historic as well as 100 card brawl formats. So if those are your jam, just be aware of that change, because it did nerf the card more than a single mana increase would normally dictate. While not technically a mono red card, Lightning Helix has become an absolute standard staple, giving you the versatility of not only dealing 3 damage to any target, but gaining you 3 life in the process. And, well, if you haven't heard it before, every deck is Boros right now, so I'd highly recommend, if you don't have 4 copies of this, strongly consider adding it to your collection now. The set Murders of Karlov Manor did not have uncommon commanders really to speak of, but the Ixalan Lost Caverns set had a complete 2-color cycle, and amongst those, 3 really stand out as not only popular but potentially powerful commanders in their own right. Bartolome, Captain Storm, and Exile is the ones you really want to be looking at. Now, in that season, I ultimately picked Captain Storm as my budget commander of choice, And ironically, that had a lot to do with Murders of Karlov Manor, which came after. Murders of Karlov Manor brought with it multiple artifacts that really made this Brawl deck an underrated powerhouse. Among those, the Detective Satchel, Gleaming Gear Drake, and Scene of the Crime, an artifact, land, and clue in its own right. Adding extra punch like this to Captain Storm really put this deck over the top. Last but certainly not least, we need to talk about those higher rarity cards in particular that, well, kind of punch above their weight. And in this case, both the ones we're going to talk about are lands or land cycles. First up, we've got Cavern of Souls, which is really all about tribal. As it comes into play, you pick a creature type. It'll produce a mana of any color that can be used to cast a creature of that type. And that creature using that mana cannot be countered. When you're not casting creatures of the chosen type, this land still produces a colorless mana to help power out your other spells. As long as tribal is going to be a thing, which for standard is going to be the foreseeable future, this is going to be a real staple. And with more than a year left before this rotates out of standard, the time is now, if you don't already have it. Next up, we've got a cycle of man lands, and while I don't often suggest picking up 2-color rare lands, there's 2 in particular here that I think are worth noting. The first being the Restless Prairie, the green-white version that directly supports the go-wide strategies that we very often see in not only white, but its green-white and red-white counterparts. We see very often in green-white of late. And also the green-red man land is a dinosaur by creature type, which can fit very nicely into a number of budget-friendly decks. As I alluded to earlier, I don't typically support using your wildcards to pick up 2-color rare dual lands. This is particularly true of the green dual land cycles from Murders of Karlov Manor, as these are available to you as part of the Slime Against Humanity jump-in pack. That should be available to you through rotation of 2025, so probably 6 to 9 months yet, at least at the time of recording. I would not spend wildcards on these, pick them up through that jump-in pack instead. In a similar thread, the uncommon Insidious Roots is a nifty little Graveyard Matters type strategy. It's been very popular from time to time as a build-around card, but as of late, it has not been a particularly good option for a budget deck. So while it's certainly worth keeping an eye on, I don't think I would craft this just yet. Be sure to keep an eye on my budget deck tier list for updates on this strategy and potentially other cards that we talked about here in this video. So there it is, guys. That's what's on my radar as a free-to-play player, considering crafting cards for Lost Caverns of Ixalan and Murders at Karlov Manor. Of course, if you are looking for similar wildcard crafting advice, we do one of these every single season as the set becomes less available for free-to-play players, i.e. it's no longer featuring packs in the Mastery Pass. We're also organizing these in a newly created playlist, and we will have a link to that at the end of the video. Be sure to check it out. This can be very helpful for those new players that are looking to add a lot of value to their collection without burning through all their wild cards. And of course, let me know what you think about these selections, and if you think there's anything that I missed or anything that, well, you just think I'm wrong about. Let's talk about it, and those conversations are helpful for the community. And before we go, while every member of this community is important to me, I just wanted to take a moment and give a shout out to those patrons providing financial support and keeping the Stronghold from being a complete financial black hole. And of course, let me leave you with some suggestions for your next step here on the channel.